been having throughout the course of the week. And you can understand why it's been consistent, because as we go through the day, new information comes out about the forex crisis, about the cost of things in the market, amongst many other factors to consider when it comes to the cost of living and the financial reality, the economic reality of the average Nigerian. So today on the Situation Room, of course, we would be talking about the rising inflation and the corresponding increase in the cost of living. Now, the latest MBS statistics released on Friday, I believe, showed that inflation rate in January rose to 29.9%. This is the highest since 1996. The currency, that's the naira, even further plummeted to about 1,600 to a dollar on the official market and about 1,900 on the parallel market. And this in a way reflects an almost 250% loss of the value of the naira in the last year. While these figures have unfortunately translated to consecutive weeks of extreme hunger, of businesses shutting down, possibilities of more out of school children, and the likelihood of a breakdown of social order, with many threats to protest, to down tools, amongst other things. Well, today on the program, we would be discussing the pressing issue of rising inflation and, of course, the impacts that it has on the cost of living, the factors that are driving this trend, and then explore potential solutions to address these challenges that are being faced by individuals and families across Nigeria. And joining me on the show to provide expert analysis and insightful opinion on how we can navigate these economic uncertainties together is Professor Olawale Ajayi. He's a professor for legal, social, and political environment of business and head of the Department of Strategy at the Lagos Business School. Such a pleasure to have you join us today, sir. Thank you for being here. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me well enough?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for
Yes.
inviting me.
Of course. So I already gave out the figures, the inflation figures, 29.9%. That's just headline inflation. There's food inflation that is, 34% or probably even higher, because the figures go higher by the hour. There's also the forex crisis, the exchange rate on the parallel market about 1,900. The official rate is edging towards 1,600. That is, if it's not already 1,600 at this very moment. But before we begin to dissect the current inflation figure, I want us to talk a little bit about the build up to this and maybe even refer to this trend across different administrations. For example, in 2015, under the administration of the former President Muhammadu Buhari, we still operated with a single digit inflation figure of about 9% or 9.01% if you want to be exact, and that was at the start of his tenure. At the end, we were at 18.85%. That's in 2022. So would you be kind enough to address some of the general contributing factors that took us from a single digit inflation figure some 8 years ago to the double digit inflation figures that we're currently experiencing, which is rising by the day?
Thank you very much. I think one of the notable issues was the recession that occurred shortly after President Buhari's administration came into place. And this, of course, was there was an effort, of course, to boost spending in order to curtail the recession. Necessarily, that would have an inflationary effect. We also then had, within that period, COVID-19, which also required massive public spending as an effort to reflate the economy. So these were some of the reasons for the rise in the inflation rate.
All right, thank you very much. Yes.
Unfortunately, the issue of insecurity and also started to become rather alarming during the tenure of President Buhari. And the insecurity has an effect of driving farmers off the farms, and this steadily grew just beyond the northeast, and we began to see effects even in the food baskets of the nation. And now, by the time he left, it was almost all over the place. So I think that is one. The third I would like to mention, of course, which is probably part of the first reason which I mentioned, were the development banking programs of the central bank, the anchor borrowers, and so on. So I think these are some of the reasons why we saw that rise from 9% to about 18%. And of course, in 2023, things became sort of exacerbated.
Yes.
Don't forget that, concluding that President Buhari's tenure was also this effort to give us new naira, and we had scarcity. So all of these effects, I think, accounted for the rise in inflation rates.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor. I appreciate that you highlighted this points, the recession that we went through, the COVID-19 insecurity, some of the programs of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and also the redesigning of the naira. All of these factors played into the rise that we saw regarding the inflation figure. And I needed us to highlight the past because it's very relevant to our present situation, and it influenced our economic strength as a nation. So let's talk about the present. As at May of 2023, which we can very much consider the handover month, headline inflation was about 22.41%. And since that very moment, we have experienced consecutive month-on-month basis increase, and it led us to this point that we're at right now, 29.90% headline inflation, about 34% food inflations. Let's talk about the policies of this present administration. A lot of people believe that these policies are solely responsible for the spike, and some of the policies, the fuel subsidy removal, the unification of the exchange rates, the floating of the naira, amongst many other policies. So I want to ask you directly, Professor, do you agree that these policies are solely responsible for the sudden spike that we saw for inflation and headline inflation and food inflation? And how exactly do you believe these policies triggered the spike?
Well, I must say that the subsidy removal was actually something that had been put in place by the Buhari administration. Don't forget that there was no budgetary provision
past June
for payment of subsidy past June. So, And I must say there's been consensus amongst discerning, analysts, commentators, and policy apparatchiks, that this subsidy will have to be dealt with, will have to be removed. I, for one, agree with that position because, it's an undifferentiated subsidy. If it was targeted, very particularly to the vulnerable, fine, but you are subsidizing people who have fleets of cars, etc. So I must say that these were already anticipated. It was also anticipated by any discerning observer, an economist, that the removal of subsidy or adjustment in subsidy would lead to an inflationary spike because you are going to have increase in prices of fuel, petrol, PMS basically. And because this is a very major component in transportation, it was going to pass through the household. It was going to pass through to, logistics of moving agricultural products, and of course logistics for manufacturing and so on. So it was already anticipated that there was going to be a spike. Now, that may have been one of the reasons why the previous the government had not, worked up the courage to take those measures, apart from the pushback from civil society. So there is no doubt that this was anticipated, but in my own case is that national strategy meant that we had to do something about the subsidy, which we were not even able to afford anymore. And we are not able to afford it anymore. Now, the truth of the matter is that this is not attributable merely to subsidy removal. It is attributable to weaknesses in our economy over time. The inability to develop a productive economy or, industrial capacity, and our reliance on monoproduct, our infrastructural deficiencies, whether you're talking about hard infrastructure or soft infrastructure, including social safety nets. So it's a case of we have emphasized consumption rather than production, and we all have been consuming. So this is crunch time. We can no longer afford this type of profligacy. However, it will occasion pains. The issue, of course, is how well do you manage policy change, or do you manage introduction of policy? Final thing I'll say on this point, of course, is that unfortunately, unlike when President Obasanjo was leaving and Yar'Adua was taking office, there were no reserves. There was no healthy reserves and excess, crude reserve, because we did have an accretion in crude oil prices almost for 1 or 2 years before President Buhari left. But the nation could not benefit at all because crude oil production suffered from all of the thefts, which we just woke up to discover that in a particular month, for example, perhaps all that was produced or supposedly sold was less than perhaps 500,000 barrels. And we're wondering what is happening here. How could things have degenerated from a situation where Nigeria could produce 2 million barrels, 1.8 million barrels, to we're now looking for rats and rodents that are stealing petrol from the pipelines? So these are some of the sorry problems we've had. When the President Yar'Adua took over the period that he was in power, the economy grew by about 8%. During President Obasanjo's presidency, 8 years, the economy grew by about 6.95%. And so you saw during Obasanjo's administration, we had a very good economic team, and we achieved macroeconomic stability and good macroeconomic management. But it has been a downward trend since that time. So these are some of the variables we have to put in play. In fact, when President Buhari was leaving, there was the notorious ways and means, broglio of about 29 trillion, printing of money that was not backed up by any production. And so I think these are issues that must be placed on the table. Of course, any government that comes to power or comes to administration will have to take the responsibility, or rather, the buck will have to stop at the table of who is currently occupying a rock. But for us to expect that after years of mismanagement, profligacy, and decades of not getting our economy in the right direction, you are suddenly going to get things right. It's a bit fanciful.
Well,
somebody must be able to tell Nigerians that there's going to be a hard slog.
Sure. Thank you. So if you're just joining Lawali Ajay, he is a professor at school. Today we're talking about across different administrations in the rising inflation. Is about 34% things. We have the All Farmers Association of Nigeria, for example, who blamed wholesalers that they were disrupting the domestic supply chain, they were hoarding food, and they were smuggling it to other countries, amongst other things. Can we agree that these practices are major contributors to the current food crisis that we have in the country? Or maybe that's not even the problem. Is it that the food is available, but the average Nigerian simply cannot afford it? What are your thoughts?
Obviously, food production has been challenged owing to insecurity over these past number of years. These menace or bandits, whatever you want to call it, has been the blight on the nation. So I think that we must put that on one side. The inefficiencies in agricultural production have also not been addressed. Nigeria generally produces more food than it really requires. But most of the food gets spoiled on the farms or during transport from the farms to the markets, etc. There's also there's a point that we generally practice subsistence farming and we don't use the best seeds, that give us the best yields. So I think we must put that on one side. Evidently, there are also imperfections in the market, which means either some of the issues you have mentioned, wholesalers, and
the hoarding.
The hoarding, these are inefficiencies in the market system. And then you also have speculation, which incidentally is a natural phenomenon which has been managed in capitalism, in economies. Anytime there's scarcity, you're going to have speculation. And typically you also have speculators who are looking for value. So those are issues that one must bear in mind. But there's also the point that the weakness of the Naira, so to say, has made exports of food products very attractive. Just across the border, CFA is quite stronger than Naira now. So it makes sense for farmers to export their products to Niger Republic or all the Francophone countries that are around us. Now, if the issue of insecurity had been taken away, and perhaps infrastructural rigidities in terms of, roads, high cost of logistics have been minimized, we will be in a sweet spot where we are producing, we're exporting, we're adding to revenue, non-oil revenue, and we're able to feed ourselves, which would mean that in the next planting season, there will be production of even more, food and cash crops. So unfortunately, things don't line up in this scenario. And so these are some of the problems we're facing. Of course, we learned about hoarding and in Kano, and this will be some of the distortions you'll have around the country. So I think these are also causes of the problem that we're having.
Right.
It's interesting that Olam and some of the other, manufacturing off-takers are complaining about artificial rise in prices. So obviously there is a lot of speculation also at play in the grief that the nation is witnessing.
Right.
Obviously, with the way the naira is going, there will be lower purchasing power. So obviously there will be a higher level of inflation anyway.
Well, we're streaming live on Facebook, by the way. We're streaming the program live on Facebook and on YouTube. So please do well to join us via social media. Mainland 98.3 FM is how you find us on both platforms. You can very well use the live chat option available. If you have questions or you have contributions, you can drop them in real time. When it's time to take feedback, we'll refer back to those questions. This is the Situation Room on Mainland 98.3 FM, the sound of Lagos. Professor, you mentioned, Forex as a factor that, plays out with the food crisis. And this is aside from the artificial scarcity that's going on, the hoarding and wholesalers choosing to smuggle this food, in a manner of speaking, to neighboring countries rather than sell it here in the country because they don't think it's beneficial to them. But then in a bid to stay afloat amid the catastrophe, allow me to use that word, in the business environment, the Forex crisis, as at the time I was preparing for the program, on the parallel market, the dollar to the naira was still around 1,730. But before I came on air, it was about 1,900 naira on the parallel market. Even on the official rate, it's about 1,600, as opposed to the 1,400 that was obtainable whilst I was preparing for this just a few hours ago. So business owners have resorted to price fixing. They, out of the blue, increased the price of their commodity. And in a way, this prompted the federal government to lock some stores. I don't know if you heard about that. I think a store in Abuja and some in Lagos as well. They had to lock it and even threaten further sanctions. Now, both the seller and the buyers are victims of this current economic reality. The sellers want to make more profit. The buyers cannot even afford the product or the services. And in all of this, the federal government is choosing to step in by punishing the business owners for increasing their prices by locking their stores. So I want you to help us understand, Professor, where do we draw the line between consumer exploitation and profit maximization? What do you think about this? The sellers trying to maximize profit and in a way are extorting the consumers, or do I have this all wrong?
I think we have to make some clarifications. My understanding was that a particular supermarket was locked up in Abuja because of anti-competitive practice. But in other words, there was a bait and switch practice that was going on in that place, in terms of how they marked their goods. It wasn't a case of saying that the goods were overpriced. This was, I guess, the Consumer the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission enforcing its law and trying to ensure that consumers are not cheated. So I think it's a false narrative and a very unhelpful narrative, which is like demarketing Nigeria to say that the federal government is locking up businesses. I don't think that is true. So we need to sort that out. The other point is that if you are a business and you stock raw materials at a particular price, and those prices are going up, if you don't want to be out of business, you have to raise your prices so that your stock holding will not go down, or so that you will not go out of business. So there would be that natural, practice by businesses to try to make sure that they can restock when they go to the market in terms of pricing. Of course, you will also have those who go beyond, what is decent profit to try to price gouge. And it is for government to select the right policy measures to use. For example, we've seen discussions between government and cement producers. So that's a policy of moral suasion. I suspect part of that discussion will be, what are your input costs? What is a fair margin in terms of profit? What ground can you give to see that we can manage this economy? Yeah, so you can have that as a policy measure in terms of moral solution. We've also had NATO, which went on strike but has called off the strike, and I did hear them say that the marketers have given them some accommodation in terms of pricing. That itself, that is part of interchange or interaction in the market, perhaps with the good offices of government. It's a very different thing, however, to be talking about price control. My good friend Tᴜɪᴛᴛᴇʀ obtained a judgment last week or so, out of passion. But I was a child in the 70s when we had price control boards. After this was generally after the war, and we had scarcity, we had also profiteering. At the end of the day, it was a sorry case. It really didn't work because you have people hiding, hoarding. So this command and control method will not work. They will be unhealthy. It will just more president give a right call, actually complicate matters in alcohol. What happened was a big industry in bootlegging just developed, and the situation was even exacerbated. So I think these are some of the issues that we can speak to. Obviously, all of us will have to act together. There will be need for government to ensure that the most vulnerable are taken care of by social transfers or direct, ensure that prices are moderated, will be taken. Ultimately, the important thing is to try and get the naira to a fair value. And from all economic, calculations, that fair value is probably around maybe 800 or thereabout, certainly not 1,600 and something. But when you have scarcity of supply and you have speculation, these are the type of effects that you get.
Well, talking about the intervention of the government, let's talk a little bit about the concept of subsidy. Many countries, including the United States of America, China, South Korea, etc., they provide levels of support for the citizenry. They attempt to influence the price that consumers pay, especially on food. Now, here in Nigeria, we've been sold a narrative that the subsidy regime in Nigeria is fraudulent and it favors the rich rather than those it was actually intended for. But even after the announcement that fuel subsidy had been removed, and recently we've been informed that even the subsidy on electricity was not sustainable anymore, and we might see an increase in the amount of money that we pay for electricity. There are certain reports that are indicating that a form of cushioning is still happening, and we have oil marketers who have said if we were actually paying what we were supposed to pay, we should be paying as high as 1,200 naira for a liter of PMS. So in your expert opinion, Professor, is subsidy really over, or do you think all we did was change the nomenclature? What's your idea about this whole subsidizing items for the people?
I think I also have to clarify, because there are certain narratives in the question. The first is that subsidy on PMS should not be conflated with subsidy generally. Don't forget that subsidy on diesel has been removed for quite some time.
Yeah.
And until recently, when probably there were issues in terms of crude oil production and sale, there was generally availability of diesel. Kerosene was a problem, and because it was being used by the masses, and of course we probably don't even want to be doing that. So the issue has been on PMS. Now we understand, it appears as if there's still some subsidy, because the president did say at one time that if things got bad, he will do something about it. So it's not the government has not come out to say that there's still subsidy on PMS, but the suspicion is that there's still subsidy on PMS. Had Naira value stayed true to estimate of the fair value, had domestic production of PMS come in, the situation will probably have been largely manageable. Well, this includes if there had been concerted efforts to produce public transportation initiatives. We've heard about CNG buses, that's compressed natural gas buses, that were supposed to be distributed across the nation. If these were in place, the situation would probably have been a bit assuaged. Now, there's no country that does not do subsidies. It is what you subsidize and how you subsidize that matters. I for one, I'm not happy with subsidy on PMS that ensures that in Benin Republic, it is Nigerian petrol that is sold on the roads in Benin Republic and across the rest of West Africa. Unfortunately, with the depreciation in the value of the Naira, it's even cheaper for those goods, for Nigerian, PMS from Nigeria to be sold across West Africa. The biggest problem, of course, is that we're not producing PMS domestically, we are using scarce dollars to import PMS. So that has also been a major failure over time, which apparently is now being addressed. So I hope this clarifies the position a bit. But I must say, I laugh when I hear people talk about the subsidy issue. Some people even say that, we should have managed, we should have fixed exchange rates and so on and so forth. These are command and control approaches to economic management. And if you look at Nigeria's historical trajectory from 1999 to date, you will discover that under the Obasanjo administration, which focused on market reforms and using markets as a basis for economic management, the average growth, GDP growth, was about 7%. Under the administration of President Buhari, which used a lot of command and control measures, the GDP growth was probably just about 1%. So if we are being empirical here, and if we are, working from historical data, it is obvious that a more market-facing or market-based economic management model is the way to go. Because history has shown us, at least in recent history, that has been more facilitative of economic growth. Now, in terms of development, in terms of redistribution, that is a different matter, which government can then work on. So when people talk about subsidy or no subsidy, command and control, as far as I'm concerned, this is the data. And so we should try and be evidence-based rather than unduly sentimental and emotional in terms of policy prescriptions. Of course, you talk about let everything be have a human face. Yes, but in terms of economic approach, I think this is my own understanding looking at the historical data.
So I want to ask directly, Professor, since a subsidy in itself is not exactly the problem, because you do agree with me that many countries of the world subsidize. So since the concept of subsidy is not the problem, but rather how we manage it here, how we implement it here, and the fact that it's a lot of uncertainties when it comes to subsidy, rather than remove, was there no way we could maybe modify and properly monitor all of the channels? Wouldn't that have been a safer path to follow than just remove the subsidy at a go, especially because we are currently operating on a very, very volatile economy in a manner of speaking?
I think as I did mention, the issue is probably not subsidy. In fact, subsidy is a symptom of a much deeper and more pervasive problem. Yeah. So the question of perhaps the subsidy could have been kept, I don't know. Could we have afforded it? Can we afford it now? Because what happens is that money that should be used to build roads, hospitals, and so on are being used for subsidies. So you can't have both. You either have one or the other. So the question is, which will we rather have? And I think what we heard Nigerians say is that we can't trust government to spend the money that is saved from subsidy, in a thrifty manner. Well, so the issue is, can we have government spend this money in a thrifty manner? From my position, from my own perspective, the day you announce, in other words, any president that took the oath of office in, was it May or whatever, and began to speak about subsidy maybe a month or two or whatever, immediately you will say that we are going to address this subsidy issue. People will start to hoard, people will start to speculate, because people will also anticipate that there will be inflationary pressure, and not only will those who want to ensure that they can restock at the same levels begin to get going, you're also going to have people who are trying to take advantage. So the issue of subsidy removal, from my perspective, could never be neat. I don't think that would have been easy to address. But having removed subsidy, we must, that's on PMS. The issue then is, what do we do? Palliatives, but don't forget, these are palliatives for the most vulnerable. It's not palliatives for you and I. But everybody now is crying for palliatives, including millionaires and billionaires. So that's missing the point. The second thing is, because public transportation is a very big part of the household budget, we will then needed to then say, what are we going to do about public transportation in order to minimize the inflationary shocks? And we were hearing things like, we'll produce CNG buses and so on and so forth, but I'm not sure if those buses have arrived, or if they have arrived, they are probably few, and government is not singing about them. Finally, so that I don't keep speaking, increasing amounts of money are being shared as fact to the state government and the local government. That is where the removal of subsidy is going. What are they doing with the money? So all this undue concentration on the federal government is an easy cop-out for the state and local governments. Citizens should demand transparency, public services, and good governance from their local government and their state government. So I would rather say that it is good to protest, it is good to ask questions, but let us demand good governance at all levels of government. And while we do so, let us avoid getting into a situation of a general breakdown of law and order.
Right. Because
from my own perspective, democracy, even though imperfect, is the only way Nigeria or Africa will be able to ensure a better participation of citizens in economic activity than any form of dictatorship or anti-democratic apparatus. Look at Niger, look at those three governments. Everything is going down, and it will continue to go down, while the rest of the world is advancing in the new knowledge economy, digital economy. It is only with democracy you can have innovation by citizens and businesses It is only with democracy that you can change your government. It is only with democracy you can have everyone participate in governance and economic activity with the freedom that rule of law gives you according to the institutions of your government. So people, we should be very careful in what we do.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Professor. If you're just joining us once again, this is the Situation Room on Mainland 98.3 FM, the sound of Lagos. We're streaming the show live on Facebook and on YouTube at Mainland 98.3 FM. So please do well to join us on social media. I'm having a conversation with Professor Olawale Ajayi. He is a professor for legal, social, and political environment of business and the head of the Department of Strategy at the Lagos Business School. The topic of conversation is the rising inflation figures and more or less the impacts that it has on the cost of living. We're trying to understand the concept of cause and effect, and we're viewing this from all angles. Professor, earlier you took words right out of my mouth when you spoke about, the FAC allocation. A lot of money are now available to the state and local government, but I did take my time to go through inflation in different states. Kogi State is about 35.78%, or your state about 34.58%, Akwa Ibom about 33.16%, and all of this is happening despite the fact that we have governors that are getting a tremendous amount of money from their FAC allocation. Even aside from their normal allowances, they're still getting some money from the government. I don't know if you remember the 2 billion that was given to states. It was originally 5 billion, but 2 billion was given to them. Yet we have inflation figures in states even higher than the headline inflation. And you mentioned something about the reaction of the people. Professor, insecurity in a way is an index of hunger. Hungry people are angry people, and angry people cause chaos. And only a few days ago, the Emir of Kano, Aminu Bayero, that's his name now, he told the presidency through his wife that, tell the presidents that it's getting harder to pacify the people. The Christian Association of Nigeria is also saying people are getting agitated. The labor unions are protesting and threatening to strike. The National Association of Road Transport Owners are threatening to down tools. Stakeholders in the midstream and downstream sectors are saying the same thing. And even the AFDB recently put out a report, and they were warning that African countries, including Nigeria, might see social unrest over the course of the coming months because of all of the things going on. I need you to further reiterate the connection between the hunger or the food crisis, in a manner of speaking, and the social or security risk that would most likely be attributed to this situation if we do not immediately get a handle on things.
Well, okay, so you started off talking about money that was given states, government to as palliative.
Yeah.
Do we know how those palliatives have been applied? Is this information that is freely available? Is there evidence that the money reached the persons it was supposed to reach? What is the welfare provision that the state government have put in place and continue to implement? Because it is expected that when you want to deal with the issue of subsidy, you want to deal with the issue of the exchange rate, there would be inflationary, consequences. So, as I did mention, you then want countercyclical action to ensure that those who are most vulnerable, are cushioned in terms of these price rises. So, it's an open secret that the local government system is virtually emasculated by state government. This is the time to demand that the local government should begin to function. This is the time state government should be, paying due attention to agriculture, This is the time state government should be trying to attract industry, trying to help entrepreneurs grow, rather than be lackadaisical or be hostile to business growth. This is the time for good governance. This is the time for collaboration across all social partners. And by the way, I think it was a bit unfortunate that some of our revered leaders also appear to be speaking in a way that is probably may actually not help to douse the situation. So it is unfortunate that communication, that dialogue, the strategy, and the political capital that is needed to make difficult economic, and structural changes is not quite in place. Part of that is also attributable to the very acrimonious presidential elections that we had just a year ago. And you observe that the candidates continue to, towards it now, campaign. So rather than not settling down to governance, it's a continual drama every day. And my own sense is that some people would rather that things go down rather than we try and build this economy and this country. Of course, it's incumbent on whoever is in the seat of power now to demonstrate the political dexterity that will bring in the political capital to support difficult economic changes that this nation must address anyway.
Right. Well, Professor, we're going to go on a break in about 4 minutes to take the headline news. That's going to last, around 4 minutes or thereabout, also because we have commercials lined up. But we're definitely going to reconnect with you to continue this conversation. In another 10 minutes, we should be over with the questioning and have people call in and contribute as well. But before I let you go, very briefly, in 2 minutes, if you can, you said something about certain statements being made by those in the political class. And I'm going to reference that to my next statement, being that there seems to be some sort of a margin of disconnect between the political class and the average Nigerian. A lot of stakeholders in the political environment have said things that in a way triggered the people. Let me use that as an euphemism of some kind. We have Mr. Bayo Ononuga, who said something like the kidnapping situation is being exaggerated by the media. We have the son of the president who said you have to endure, we're playing the long game here, amongst other things. But then these are individuals that are in a very comfortable place. Allow me to say that. I'm trying so hard to use the right words. They're not exactly going through what an average Nigerian is going through. They have access to at least the basic things of life. And Nigerians are asking the questions, are you really oblivious to what we're going through? Are you really oblivious to the prices of things? Are you oblivious to the fact that the average Nigerian cannot feed himself for a day? Are you oblivious to the fact that the average Nigerian have to trek long distances to get to work on a daily basis? Or are they just relying on our ability to adapt to the situation is why they're making these statements that a lot of people have termed as insensitive?
If I have to be direct, if the press office of the president makes statements, that is to be expected. I mean, they will obviously try to push back. It's a conversation. Freedom of expression requires that everybody should be able to say what they want to say to the extent that it is not criminal or subversive or defamatory. So, I mean, all that interchange is very good. Democracy, I mean, if you go from the point of view of John Stuart Mill, can only thrive when you have a healthy joust of opinions, different types of opinions. So that merely expressing opinions should not cause anybody, as long as these opinions are responsible.
Right.
So I think that's the way to look at it.
Right, Professor.
And by the way,
I apologize. I'm so sorry. We have to go on a brief break to take the headline news, but we'll be back in just a few minutes to take your other submissions.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it's still the Situation Room on Mainland 98.3 FM. The headline news is up next. Please stay with us.
Headline news on 98.3 Mainland FM.
Good evening. Headline news on 98.3 Mainland FM. My name is Omobola Sandra. Emefiele threatens Akpabio with 25 billion naira lawsuit due to defamation. DSS urges Labour to shun protests in interest of peace. Senate urges federal government to rent further hold future leaders forum during sports. Kills 8
when coverage for good.
Display and powerful features is here to redefine your smartphone experience.
We've also partnered with Google and MTN to bring you even more with the Spark 20 Google apps and loads of free MTN data. Your digital life just got smarter and more connected.
Grab your Techno Spark 20 today and step into a world where style meets technology.
Techno, stop at nothing.
Official partner of the African Cup of Nations 2023.
The drama, the suspense, the emotions, the gang moments. Don't miss out on Nollywood movies and web series on YouTube with the YouTube Buffet plan from MTN. You can enjoy over 10 hours of Nollywood content made for you. Sharply dial *312*800# to activate the YouTube Buffet plan from MTN and start enjoying YouTube made for you.
The Broadcast Art Institute Supplementary Admissions 2023-2024. Few vacancies exist in the Department of Broadcast Journalism and Multimedia Technology for admission in the 2023-2024 session. If you scored 100 and above in the 2023-2024 UTME, together with 5 relevant credits, but have not gained admission, you can change over to the Broadcast Art Institute Lagos for National Diploma in Broadcast Journalism and Multimedia Technology. The Broadcast Art Institute is accredited by the National Board for Technical Education (NBTE) to offer national diploma programs in broadcast journalism and multimedia technology. You can visit our campus at number 38 Odofi Street, Igbobo, Ikorodu, Lagos, or call the following numbers: 0806 149 9992 or 0703 713 1166 or 0816 587-1415.
The Financial Services Regulation Coordinating Committee, FSRCC, in collaboration with the National Broadcasting Commission, NBC, wishes to draw the attention of the public to the worrisome increase in the activities of illegal financial operators, IFOs, which threaten public trust and the stability of the Nigerian financial system. The FSRCC and NBC hereby advises the general public to refrain from dealing with unlicensed financial operators who deceive individuals with unrealistically high investment returns. Make sure to verify the licensing status of such companies and schemes on this website. To report any suspicions of illicit financial activities, call 0700 225 5226, 0800 225 5226, or +234 817 665 6273. Let's work together to uphold the integrity of Nigeria's financial system. Announcer, FSRCC. Meals have a way of taking us on a journey, and when you add plenty of vegetables like ugu and season with the rich taste of North seasoning cubes, Even better.
So, go ahead and elevate your meals with more vegetables and the rich taste of Knorr cubes. Today, eat for good.
Hey there, tech enthusiasts! Get ready to ignite your world with the all-new Tecno Spark 20.
That's right, the Spark 20 with its stunning display and powerful features is here to redefine your smartphone experience.
We've also partnered with Google and MTN to bring you even more. With the Spark 20, Google apps and loads of free MTN data, your digital life just got smarter and more connected.
Grab your Tecno Spark 20 today and step into a world where style meets technology.
Tecno, stop at nothing.
Official partner of the Africa Cup of Nations 2023.
The drama, the suspense, the emotions, the gang moments. Don't miss out on Nollywood movies and web series on YouTube. With the YouTube buffet plan from MTN, you can enjoy over 10 hours of Nollywood content made for you. Sharply dial *312*800# to activate the YouTube buffet plan from MTN and start enjoying. YouTube made for you.
When your whole world comes crashing down, is look up. Assemble the team. It's showtime. The brains. Waking up.
What'd you have for breakfast?
We are the sound of Lagos, and this is Mainland 98.3 FM.
You didn't see that coming, did
you? Dear Nigerians, I am determined, I repeat, to give you the affordable and reliable power.
The stakes are higher than ever.
Government policy does not support youth in this country. So if you say you have any idea, one day, one way or the other.
The conversations are louder than imagined. The expectations are greater. The demand for quality blueprints needed to make informed decisions is constantly being reviewed.
You can't start hiding under party or anything. We are leaders that are entrusted by our people. Come and speak on their behalf.
The Situation Room on 98.3 Mainland FM provides the platform where all of your demands are met. Issue-based conversations about politics, policies, leadership and governance in Nigeria and around the world. Join us every Mondays through Fridays from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. as we engage and interact towards setting the agenda for proper accountability and public engagements. The Situation Room is here. We welcome the roommates.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. This is still Mainland 98.3 FM, the sound of Lagos. My name is Sage Babalola, and again, you're welcome back to the Situation Room. Today on the show, we've been talking about the rising inflation figures and the corresponding increase in the cost of living. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Professor Ajayi, who is a professor for legal, social, and political environment of business and the head of Department of Strategy at the Lagos Business School. We started conversations by talking about inflation across administration. We spoke about the government policies and the ripple effects that they've had on these inflation figures. We spoke about the activities of food hoarders alongside the depletion of the purchasing power of the average Nigerian. We spoke about the consumer extortion that's going on by some vendors, especially those who sell fast-moving goods. We spoke about the concept of subsidy payment and what it means to us as a nation, the connection between hunger and insecurity, the role of the state and local government in mitigating this hunger, especially because there's been some sort of tremendous increase in the allocations that they've gotten thanks to the amount of money that the government says they've been able to save from the removal of fuel subsidy, and also some sort of conversation about the forex crisis. Professor Ajayi is still going to be speaking with us very briefly before we open the phone lines and allow you an opportunity to speak. week, the minute I'm able to reconnect with the professor. All right. So we want to talk a little bit further before we start to take phone calls. But then again, you could definitely join us on social media. We're streaming the show live on Facebook and on YouTube. So you can do well to join us and drop your submissions there in real time. When it's time for us to start taking public opinion, then we can take the questions or contributions that you have sent in so far. Please pardon me, I'm trying to reconnect with Professor Jai. But whilst we're doing that, I might as well just take the opportunity to read some of the messages that I have gotten on Facebook, so that we don't, waste time trying to do all of that. Now we have Tᴡɪᴛᴛᴇʀ on Facebook who says, "Good evening, Sage. Mr. Tinubu did things without properly thinking about it. He said to Nigerians that he will remove the subsidy even if they let them protest. Nobody would say that in a democratic setting. He does not necessarily have the ability to cater to the masses, and that's why he hasn't done very well with 8 months in power. Power is given legitimately by the electorate. Pure water is now 50 naira and is 100 naira for 3 sachet here at Magodo. Gosh, all right, Tᴡɪᴛᴛᴇʀ, thank you so very much. Oh, I think we have the professor joining us now. Professor Jai, welcome back. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So earlier we were trying to talk about the disconnect between the political class and the average Nigerian, and your position is that, in a democratic setting, we all have the freedom of expression to speak our mind, as long as it can be considered reasonable. But because of our time, I want us to have a conversation about the interference from international organizations, because this have been referenced a lot in all of the economic struggles of the country. For example, the IMF and the World Bank have over the years offered a lot of advice are, in a manner of speaking, questionable. And all of these things, permit me to say, have exacerbated the suffering of poor Nigerians. Business owners also, they're not exactly having a field day, but somehow we have a government that continue to adhere very strictly to the recommendations of this international organization. So I want to ask you, Professor, don't you think it's time we begin to reevaluate or maybe even modify our relations with this country-specific economic?
With due respect, again, it's either a red herring or maybe subsidy removal was something of the parties one had in their manifestos. So it could not be argued that it was international organizations that motivated those manifestos. Obviously, social suffering can easily lead to amnesia, and of course, people will naturally react in an angry manner, as you did say, as the economic conditions become more and more comfortable. So I think the important thing, of course, is for governments at all levels to minimize the pains. But for anybody to assume that we could continue to spend money, subsidizing PMS. I don't. Some people even say there is no subsidy. Well, I don't want to get into all this type of romantic, theories. But as I have said, economic principles, economic approaches, they are technical prescriptions. You then have to implement them within an institutional context. And yes, we need to be mindful of our own institutional context. But the concept of inflation rate is the same, whether in Nigeria, China, or wherever it is. So I think that is where the problem has come. We have not had the various, particularly the state and local governments, and I must emphasize this point, having active and transparent governance, ensuring that the pain, I think.
Well, in all of the analysis you've given, I appreciate the fact that for every point you make, you try to attach a solution of some kind to the answers. And you did ask that we maybe start, giving some sort of microscopic look into the activities of the state and local government and try to implement policies in ways that, the blowback is not very heavy on the citizenry, amongst other things. So I think that we have very limited time left. I beg your pardon, and I really want us to use that to take a public opinion in our first phone call for the day. Hello.
Eminently, everybody, people are boring. What are boring? What second money that they have in Nigeria?
That are being.
Because what I'm saying is that the government, there's no way you can sugarcoat it.
It's not of being in work. The other point, of course, is to find a simple way. You need the political capital to be able to explain to people what changes need to be made and, how those consequences will be managed. I don't think those have been sufficiently well taken. So what we have is everybody is expostulating their own economic viewpoint. And I think the media is also very much a part of the problem. I listen to a lot of radio programs where it looks like we're still in the campaign season. And some of our OAPs are not even making informed comments. So I think that is what I can very usefully say.
Okay, let's take another phone call. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Please, in a minute, if you can.
Okay. Number one, I want to ask the professor. Can you tell me, after it of the central park today, my opinion is this: all the knowledge I have now, when you talk of inflation, you talk for especially high cost of prices, it's caused by the CBN. If they can go back to old dollar, but okay, they correct the value the naira beyond expectation. Like now, it is stabilized naira at 800 at what do you call it? $800 to $1 a Monday. Those speculators, those who cause saboteur, if you not set the young now in naira, I'm telling you, everything come back to normal. That's my statement.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I apologize. I might not be able to take any more phone calls. We have less than 2 minutes to actually leave the studio for the full bulletin. That's the news at 5:30. But then let me see if I could take a few messages we've gotten on Facebook. We do have here, Dekule Matthew says, can we start having serious... Okay, thank you very much. We have here, with the high level of inflation and looking at the drama surrounding subsidy, which the government have never been transparent in dealing, I laugh every time they come up to say they're subsidizing and the citizens are not even seeing or enjoying the benefit. For instance, the government said it is subsidizing electricity and it has never been constant or available for the people. Another is that the pipeline, and now the government said it will start subsidizing cement, which before now was sold for 5,500 but is about 13,000. Even with the intervention of the government through subsidy, it will be sold for around 8,000. What kind of subsidy do we call that? The Lagos State government brought out the BRT buses and said they are subsidizing the price, and it is even above the fare of yellow buses. I want to plead to the government to be more transparent and make life more comfortable for the citizens. Okay, the government didn't say they will subsidize cement. They just had a meeting with stakeholders in that particular sector, and they were able to come to an agreement that the prices will be reduced based on location. So it wasn't like they offered to pay some amount of money for that to happen. It was a meeting, and we don't have any verified information that the government offered to pay money to the manufacturers of cement at all. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much. Professor Ajayi, I want to appreciate you for your time today on the show. Thank you so very much. Professor Ajayi is a professor for legal, social and political environment of business and the head of the Department of Strategy at the Lagos Business School. Thank you so very much for your time, sir. We look forward to talking to you some other time.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, have a wonderful day. Thank you. All right, well, that's where we draw the curtains of conversation for today. We appreciate you. Until tomorrow, 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. on the Situation Room. Other important matters will come out and we will discuss them. But of course, the show continues. Conversations happen 24 hours on this station. My name is Sage Babalola. Please enjoy the rest of the day. And of course, remember to take it easy, take care of yourself and take care of your neighbor if you have the capacity to do so. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Mainland 98.3 FM. Don't touch the dial. 98.3 FM. Don't touch the dial.
This is the Global News on 98.3 Mainland FM.
Good evening. Welcome to the Global News at 5:30 on Mainland 98.3 FM. In the highlights, Emefiele threatens Akpabio with 25 billion naira lawsuit due to defamation. DSS urges Labour to shun protest in the interest of peace. On the foreign scene, Indian police tear gas protesting farmers in New Delhi. In sports, Xavi fear Osimhen threat ahead of Barcelona versus Napoli match. Now, the news in detail. The immediate past Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Godwin Emefiele has vowed to sue the Senate President Godswill Akpabio for alleged defamation. The Senate President had at Senator Barinda Mpi's Thanksgiving service in Kuruma, Thai local government area, Rivers State, on February 18th, stated that President Bola Tinubu's administration did not know the crime to charge Emefiele. He added that the president inherited an economic mess from the former CBN governor. However, in a letter through his lawyer,